Right. Hey guys, welcome back to Teen Muscle Radio and episode number 16. So today I am joined by my friend Harry Ranson, and we are going to be discussing how to set up a contest prep. So for a natural bodybuilder or any other sort of person that's looking to get really, really lean, this podcast is going to be absolutely essential for you. So before we go on, Harry, I know you very well, but the listener might not. Well, they should do, shouldn't they, really? So give them a bit of an idea. They've been hiding under a rock or something if they don't know you, of course, Harry. So give them a bit of an idea of what you're about, and go ahead, mate.
Okay, so Harry Ranson, I am 25 years old, and I've been in the fitness industry, I'd say, since I was about 18. So 7 years, started off just standard gym instructor, got into one-to-one PT, branched off on my own, did my own thing, set up the performance project, which I am now no longer a part of, and then moved on to online coaching, basically. So that's what I'm doing now as of like a few months. So I'm a full-time online coach, and I've also competed in several competitions, from men's physique to natural bodybuilding and a powerlifting competition, which didn't go that well, but yeah.
So lots of sports, but been involved in the fitness industry for how long in terms of years?
Yeah, so about 7 years. About 7 years. Started off, like I said, gym instructing, and then I spent the best part of 18 months actually out in India, training some Bollywood clients and stuff like that. That was a bit of a very random time in my life, but very, very successful. I got a couple of my clients on the front of Men's Health, very amazing life experience. And then came back, and so I've had a bit of a dabble in a lot of different areas of fitness and personal training, in terms of, training very high-end clients, training everyday people, training contest prep people. I've trained a lot of different kind of types of clients.
So the reason obviously I got Harry on the podcast is he does have a wealth of knowledge in terms of not only his practical and like anecdotal knowledge towards a bodybuilding prep, but obviously you've prepped clients, you've also taken people, general population people that are wanting to get really lean, and you've got them there as well, which is obviously really important. Like, there's going to be people that are listening to this that are not only competitors looking to compete maybe next year, but it's maybe someone that's just a young guy or girl that's just wanting to get really lean and not particularly wanting to even step on stage. Maybe they're looking for a photo shoot, etc., and this should definitely help. So before we go on to how we would set up a contest prep, give the listener an idea as to how your previous contest prep, so the one that you just did, how did you set that up in terms of the overall approach? Give the listener an idea as to how long you dieted for, and whether there's anything specific that you feel is important that they know.
So the prep was 18 weeks long altogether, and I lost about 14 pounds altogether. That was from using my scales. The scales were different everywhere because I was weighing on loads of different stuff. But I think it was about 14 pounds altogether. So just to give the listeners an idea of the rate of progress, it was under a pound a week from start to finish. And I started off, I'd say, relatively lean. Like I kind of had like faded abs with a few Instagram filters and a little bit of sharpen. So I started off relatively lean, and I was just in a really good place, mentally and physically.
And what, in terms of just round up what sort of dietary approach did you have? Did you follow a meal plan? Did you follow flexible dieting?
Okay, so from start to finish, because there wasn't really that many changes that were made, I followed obviously macronutrients. So it started off 5 days at 190 grams of protein, 210 grams of carbs, and around about 55 grams of fat.
Okay.
And then there were 2 days where carbs were bumped up by about 100 grams. So I had kind of 2 back-to-back refeed days. And then as the prep went on, one of those refeed days got taken out. And then again, as the prep went on, a couple of weeks later, I think I dropped fat down. So there wasn't a huge amount of change, but it basically went from around about 2,300 calories on average down to around about 2,100.
Okay.
Maybe 2,000, like across the week on average. But
Sure.
just following macronutrient guidelines, making sure I'm eating plenty of whole foods, but also allowing myself a little bit flexibility from a treat side of thing. I tried my best not to take the mickey.
Yeah, it's quite easy to take the mickey, but I think that, from a bodybuilding perspective, it's almost essential that you don't, unless you want to feel like complete and utter shit, which we will potentially talk about. So let's sort of go into, say that's we discussed this in the gym before we sort of came on the podcast. Is like, so if we had an individual come to us or to yourself, sent you an email like, Harry, I want to start a bodybuilding prep next year. So what would your like initial questions be for that individual in terms of what sort of data you'd want to know, even prior to them, getting on stage? What sort of data would you want to collect prior to them sort of setting out the contest prep?
Joe, it's funny because obviously I knew you were going to say this question, so I was thinking about it before, and actually like a couple of years ago, I would have been like, right, I need your weight, I need your training, I need all this stuff.
Uh-huh.
Actually, the very first question I would say ask someone is, are you ready?
Okay.
Like, are you ready for a contest prep?
Yep.
Because contest prep isn't easy. Like, contest prep it will take over. Like, I mean, obviously with the whole flexible approach, and it's not quite as rigid as the old school bodybuilding style. It can be a little bit more rigid, but you've got to say to that person, are you ready? Well, two things actually. Are you ready, and why are you doing it? Because I think obviously with a lot of more social media around these days, people are seeing these ripped physiques and these people winning shows and stuff like that, and that they see the smile on stage and the tan and all that stuff, and they want that. But if that's the only reason you're doing it, to get like a new profile picture on Facebook, then just don't. Just don't do it. So yeah, actually before I'd be like, right, I want all this data. But now the first thing I would say is like, have you actually thought about this?
Okay. And what would you think would be a good rationale as to why they want to compete? So you've said obviously a bad rationale would be likes, would be photos, etc. What would you think a good rationale would be?
Well, I actually think that from there, you're going to want to get the background from the person. Like, say that they've been training for like a few years, or they've been training really seriously for a few years, and they want to compete. I like people that have that competitive edge rather than they like the sound of it and they like the look of it.
Yep.
But people that say, I find that actually a lot of people that have been sporty before in school and things like that, and they haven't quite managed to break through in whatever sport they did. Like for me personally, like I played a lot of football when I was younger, and I played to a decent standard, but I was never that like good enough to be really competitive. And I found that when I started working and beyond the age of 18, I needed another competitive outlet. So I think just looking at a person's actual background as well, that's what I would say is a good rationale for it. But I suppose it's not necessarily what is a good rationale. It's just, taking away the bad rationale. Like, are you doing it because you want to look like this? Then I'd probably suggest to that person, I'd say, just book a photo shoot. Like,
yeah, that's exactly what I'd say.
Just get semi like beach ready, because that's going to be a lot less grueling on both yourself and the people around you.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that in terms of the photo shoot setup for someone who just wants photos. And I think I'm like you in the sense that I think that's a really good question to ask as to maybe whether they've played competitive sport or had any sort of competitive endeavour before, or maybe just asking them, tell me why you want to do well, or tell me why you want to get into the best shape of your life, and you're hoping for like a good explanation, like not something like, oh, I'm a personal trainer and I want more clients. And you and me know that that's quite a bad thing to, well, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's not the best way to gain clients. And I remember actually at my first show there was a boy backstage who said, oh, I'm never doing this again, I just did it for my PT. And I was just like, well, I don't know how this is going to help, because obviously unless your niche is bodybuilders, I've got bodybuilding clients out of competing, but I don't think you'll pick up many general population. And in fact, I've actually had general population people that say they look at my profile picture and sometimes are a bit put off by to train with me, because they think I am just a bodybuilder and I'm going to beast them, and it's probably going to actually could do some damage if that's what you're aiming for. Okay, so in terms of when you would take someone, so that they're okay to compete, your rationale, you're happy with the rationale, what would you get them to like initially do differently in terms of from like a nutrition or a training perspective? Obviously, when we go into a contest prep, there's a lot of data logging. You said that you obviously went from sort of quite a relaxed approach to your eating habits to a very much like weighing everything to the gram. I remember your girlfriend quoting that she was weighing cucumber. So there's obviously a lot of data logging that's going on. So what would you say is the main things that you are logging when you start a contest prep?
Yeah, so you mentioned before, like if let's say someone wanted to compete next year, I would try and get them to be logging as much as possible.
Okay.
And a few things have definitely changed over the past sort of, I'd say the past few years, even few months. So obviously you're going to want to look at the intake. So total calorie intake, protein, carbs, fats, fiber as well. Getting them to log that, getting them to log their weight, whether that be daily or weekly. Obviously, during a contest prep, we're looking at ideally daily weigh-ins, but
Sure.
At least, trying to get some sort of general trend of what their current nutritional intake is and how that is going to be affecting their weight. So whether the idea is basically to get a better guesstimation of what calories they need to lose weight, I guess. What calories do they need to lose weight? What calories do they need to maintain weight? What calories do they need to put on weight? And I'd also ask people and say, have you ever followed any sort of fat loss plan before? Do you know the calories from that? Because then you can get a little bit of a gauge and just get as much information as possible to be like, right, okay, this person has, a quote unquote faster metabolism. Therefore we can start them on higher calories.
Okay. I have a question out of that. What's your opinion in terms of if someone was like, right, okay, I want to start a contest prep. What's your opinion in terms of them using some sort of online calculator to calculate their current macros for fat loss? And what do you think are the negative sort of sides of using a calculator? Because I don't think I've really ever used a calculator to calculate either my own or a client's macros. So why do you think that there's an issue with a calculator?
Well, the thing is, it's funny that you should say that because I've used a calculator for myself, more so just to see what the answer was. Like I haven't, and it's exactly the same as it. Like I'm like literally the most average person. Like average everything. Like everything is on the dot. But the thing is that it's always going to be averages. So you're going to have people that are outliers, and especially when you consider that what we do tends to be a little bit more active. You've obviously got to consider that it's like the government guidelines that females have got to eat 2,000 calories a day and males have got to eat 2,500. It's just a shot in the dark, really. So I think it can give people a rough guideline. Like it's typically within a couple of hundred calories because people's metabolisms generally don't change like that much unless their NEAT is super high or super low. But it's just not like it's a bit pointless if you have the time. If you have the time to weigh yourself daily and track for like 2 or 3 weeks, then you can work it out yourself. Almost like you can work out what your maintenance is by weighing yourself daily, tracking your food intake, and then just finding an average.
Sure.
So I don't really see the point in a calculator. Like I said, I did it out of just curiosity to see what the numbers, and it was pretty much bang on point. But I don't know. I think there's gonna be more and more data out there it's gonna get more accurate with these calculators.
And it might be a shot in their own foot for someone with potentially faster metabolism than another person, purely because the calculator might not take into account their activity throughout the day as opposed to just gym activity, or not enough. Like they might be extremely active and therefore burning a shit ton of calories just overall throughout the day. Therefore, they might make too drastic cuts and then end up lower on calories than they should be at the end of their sort of dieting period. So yeah, I'm sort of in agreement on that one with you. So in terms of when you get someone to come into you, like a lot of the listeners on this podcast are sort of the younger ages, so they might have potentially never got contest lean or even lean before. So how would you know if someone like a younger guy came to you, potentially like myself back in like 2014, I came to a performance project for coaching for a bodybuilding show. I had no idea at what weight I would be contest lean, but I knew what weight I was currently. So how would you assess how long that person would need for a diet? And is there any sort of strategy that you do to sort of ensure that you had enough time to get that individual lean?
I think that's a difficult one. I think you've almost got to do it once to be able to tell what body weight you're going to be. I mean, you could obviously through experience, you could look at someone and say, okay, they are roughly this percentage body fat, and then you could potentially work out what their lean body mass is based on that, and also average lean body mass based on height. I think it's a difficult one. Until you get lean once, you're never going to really know, and that's why I said before, like when I collect data from people, I find out what weight they were when they were lean before, so you can almost just gauge something off of that.
Yeah.
And what did you lose in your first? I mean, it was a lot.
45 pounds, I think. It was 45. Like a legitimate strong fat loss combined with contest prep.
yeah, exactly. Like you added like a decent amount to lose, but how much did you think you had to lose?
I thought I was a lot leaner than I was. Obviously, being a young guy, like, you don't know the standard until you see it. So I hadn't personally gone along to a bodybuilding show. So I think that potentially if you're like a teen or a junior or whatever and you're looking to get extremely lean, then I think knowing the standard is potentially really beneficial, because not only does that allow you to stay leaner than potentially you would get if you didn't know the standard, but it also gives you an idea of potentially how long you'd need. But I think everyone for their first time, I don't know about you, but everyone thinks they need less than they actually do.
Oh, like, yeah.
Every client I've had come to me for a contest prep or getting lean have been like, yeah, but I'm not that bad at the moment. I've not got much to lose, tends to be the quote. And even like Marcus, who I prepared last year, he came to me, I've not got much to lose, and he ended up losing like 30 pounds to get into contest condition. So, I think assessing it by what you previously had done is the best way possible, like you said, but also knowing the standard and potentially just staying accountable. Like, not when I came to you guys, my first progress pictures were the ones that I sent you, and they were hideous. so I think staying accountable is massively important, hence why I sort of take regular pictures now, and I'm sure you do as well, just to stay on top of not only scale weight, but how you're looking in general, and where you're maybe potentially gaining too much body fat.
What I would say on that one is I could probably count on my hand the amount of competitors that are juniors and teens that have actually come in contest peeled. So that should just be like a general kind of overview that most don't give it enough time. Yeah. That's it.
Almost consider as a teen or a junior, they potentially don't have the muscle to get into like contest shape. They still could, but they might sacrifice loads of tissue, or they're thinking, oh, I've got to be big. Like, they think big rather than contest lean, and they end up just being not in contest shape at all until they step on stage and realise it. Okay, so moving on, in terms of, so you've got them tracking and everything, so hopefully you've got them for a period of time before they decide to prep. What would you do initially in terms of calorie setting? So this is taking someone that's that's tracked with you for a little bit and now wants to prep. How drastic of a cut would you make, and is it depending on the individual, and how would you initially make that first calorie cut?
So obviously from that point, you're probably going to want to spend like a week or two before the start date at maintenance.
Okay.
And that may sound a bit weird, but I just think that you don't want to get people going from a surplus straight into a cut, because I find it's difficult to really gauge where their maintenance calories actually are. So I'd like to get people for like a week or two just sitting at maintenance. They're probably a little bit heavy anyway, just to find out what that maintenance calories is. And then from there, you're going to take like a 15 to 20% reduction in calories from there, I would say. I mean, if you wanted to go super slow, you could do like 10%, but then I find there you end up just maintaining on less calories. So
Yeah.
you need to make it significant enough to actually almost initiate the fat loss process, but not so much that it's going to be like a massive grueling. And obviously, you've got to consider that it depends on how much cardio you're going to start with as well. If you're going from naught and adding cardio, you can maybe take less calories away.
Yeah.
But that's always something that I would discuss with the client first as well. Like that's something that's definitely changed in my practice over the last sort of year or two, is having that communication and saying, rather than just saying, right, we're going to cut this many calories, that's it. It'll be like, right, what would you prefer? More cardio, more calories, and then like allowing that person to make the decision, that they almost feel that they own it, so they're taking ownership of that decision.
Sure.
So
now, on that topic, from an evidence-based point of view, I know you read your research, etc. Is there anything suggesting that from a physique, performance, or overall, fat loss idea in terms of getting the best physique on stage as a bodybuilder, is there any benefit to keeping food higher and doing more cardio, or reducing food and doing more cardio? Do you think, like, either way round, do you think there's any benefit in terms of how the physique would look? Or do you think, have you experienced, like, because I think when I, massively increased cardio, it had obviously a negative effect on training. But the fact that I was able to keep food higher made me slightly more sane. And, do you think there's any sort of anecdotal things that you've experienced with keeping food or cardio higher in terms of which way you would go?
Well, I find mostly in like female competitors, they tend to need to do a little bit more cardio because they need to keep food higher. Because obviously, if you go too low in food, that you run into the risk of becoming kind of micronutrient deficient.
Okay.
Obviously,
Yeah.
if you're kind of like a smaller female and you've got to be in a deficit, there's every chance you are going to be on 1,200-1,300 calories. And it becomes very difficult. And if you need to make further changes, then it's going to have to be cardio. But then you get into the realm of too much cardio, then overlaps into training, and you start to lose strength and muscle. So again, it's one of those things that you're going to have that communication with the person, because it's going to be all individual. You might be able to say to someone, we can do more low intensity cardio. Just go out for like a 2-hour walk every day. But again, like, does this person have the time to do that? Would they prefer to do that or keep food high? I think at the end of the day, when you're in a deficit, you just need to. It's like I say to people, it's like you getting a poke in the eye or a punch in the face. Like, they're both going to be like uncomfortable. You just got to choose your poison.
So it's more from, like, you'd say as a coach and as a competitor yourself, you'd say it's primarily preference based, as opposed to the evidence suggests that one is better than the other. Is that correct?
Yeah, because I think that if there is any evidence out there, the pool of subjects wouldn't be large enough to really give any concrete kind of suggestions anyway. But yeah, and again, it's the same sort of thing where you could increase someone's cardio. There's no reason why you couldn't change it around as well. If you increase someone's cardio and you notice that their training just goes through the floor, then you've just got to say to that person, look, okay, well, let's take your cardio back. Let's, drop calories down, see if that works. If that then improves, then that's the route you go. But until you kind of try these things, you don't really know.
Definitely. And from like a intensity perspective, have you seen anything that would suggest HIIT or LISS is better for in terms of a competition prep? And is there any sort of specific things that for like a specific client you'd recommend HIIT, or a specific client you'd recommend LISS, and why would you do that?
So HIIT, obviously in the name, is high intensity, and I've just found that when you're doing high intensity, when you're very, very lean, it effectively turns into another session. So it's almost like another resistance training session because you're causing so much damage. But again, it comes down to personal preference, whether you are able to recover from the HIIT. That would be the main thing. Like, if you're able to recover from HIIT, and people think I'm nuts when I say it, but if I ever prescribe someone HIIT, it's usually because their low intensity is so low intensity that they're just being lazy.
Shit, yeah.
So I would actually give them high intensity interval training to actually get them to burn some calories doing cardio. So yeah, but again, it comes down to that overlap. Like sometimes that will cause people a lot of problems. And I was going to say, people think I'm mad because I tell them to do HIIT after legs. And they're like, why would you make me do that? And it's like, because I want all of your hard work out of the way so that you have the time to recover. Because if you do legs and then HIIT the next day, then legs the day after that, then HIIT the day, like you're never going to be able to recover. So just by kind of grouping all the really tough, like lower body stuff or HIIT stuff, then yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. From an anecdotal perspective, I think I just cannot do HIIT when I reach a certain point in a competition prep, when I'm such and such lean, I just cannot recover from HIIT. I not from like so much a muscle perspective. I seem to always recover really well from the weights room and from cardio in terms of soreness, but in terms of I guess CNS fatigue and like my immune system, I just feel like my immune system has been magically suppressed by HIIT. Like I remember doing it once or even twice, and after both sessions I just felt like I'd got flu or cold. It just felt like it absolutely wiped me out, regardless of where I put it, regardless of when I did it. It just felt horrible. But I could do lifts for days. Like I could do a lift session in the morning, I could do a walk a long power walk in the evening, and I did that on a frequent basis with no issues at all, and it didn't really affect training. So I think it's maybe not, people need to take into perspective, like when they shoot cardio really high, like maybe a female, then they need to really find the one that really suits them the best, that they can recover from. So if, like me, you can do tons of lifts and get away with it, then that's going to be better than trying to fire in like 2 extra HIIT sessions. You could just bump up your list even more and get away with it. So I think, again, like it's definitely going to come down to preference and giving it a try, rather than thinking, this guy, like I know Brian Whittaker does like tons of HIIT, and Brian Whittaker gets into great shape, so you think I've got to do HIIT as well. At least that's what I thought. I was like, I've got to do HIIT as well. And then if you can't recover from it, then you're going to affect your sessions and damage your chances of muscle retention, which we know is massively important. So going on to that, in terms of training, Harry, like, is there anything that you would specifically change? I know that your training changed slightly as you had more of a powerlifting focus and going into a bodybuilding focus, but for an individual that just came to you, who maybe was training, let's say they were an intermediate lifter training fairly well, which is going to be the majority of the people listening to the podcast, is there anything that you'd specifically do in terms of overall training? So potentially talk about volume or exercise selection, in terms of setting up a contest prep training program.
Okay, so I would start off the prep trying to just maintain as much volume as possible. I think a lot of people would be quick to just drop volume straight away, like, oh, you're going to lose muscle. It's like, maybe don't look at increasing volume like at the start of it, but at least just try and maintain what you did as much as you can, and then only drop it off as and when needed. It's the same as calories, like a calorie deficit. Like, you don't get brownie points for losing on less calories than you need to. It's the same with volume. Like, just keep volume as, keep it at maintenance as what you were doing before, and then drop it off from there. And you could potentially look at an RPE-based system. I've never really been a fan of it, just because I find that I'm not very good at it.
Okay.
But one thing interesting that you said about exercise selection, I found that towards the end of my prep, and this is probably something that I would introduce actually into clients as well, is more like seated exercises. It sounds really, really random, but things like if you're doing squats and deadlifts and stuff, and you are trying to keep the weight on the bar as much as possible, programming things like pendlay rows and bent over rows, again, it's going to carry over to that deadlift and potentially affect that. So I would much rather someone do a seated row or a chest supported row or something like that. So it's still going to target the upper back, which is a muscle you're probably going to be targeting anyway.
Okay.
Or the lats and things like that, but you're just taking that pressure off those other muscles. And I mean, I'm talking like towards the end of a contest prep here. But yeah, that's something I would do. And then something that I did for a little bit right towards the end was some occlusion training, but I'm not really sure if that made much of a difference, if anything, to be honest.
So in terms of, I'd agree with all of that. I think the seated thing is something really interesting, and potentially that something I might look into as well. In terms of how you yourself, or potentially with clients, I know that you had a really successful fat loss client that actually gained a lot of strength during a dieting phase. So that example obviously provides me with a lot of confidence to ask the question, but how would you go about programming for gaining or maintaining strength in a dieting phase? You mentioned RPE. Would you is there anything specific that you'd recommend someone do in terms of holding on to every bit of strength that they can?
I think it's definitely a mindset thing. I think we almost know too much based on what our kind of our job roles are, and it's like you should lose strength during a cut and you should lose muscle during a cut and all this stuff. Whereas actually, the client that you spoke about, Marcus, like I didn't really change his program to anything different. Like I said, I wanted to keep his volume exactly the same and see if we can increase strength at the start of a cut, which I think a lot of people can still do.
Yeah.
He just kept going, and I would definitely say he was an outlier. But
Okay.
I even spoke to him the other day on Skype, and he was just saying the weight training sessions actually took his mind away from the diet.
Wow.
So he just used that as his mindset, and he was just like, I just kept it like that was my release from the diet. So that's why I would say to people, don't be so quick, especially at the start, to start dropping volume and dropping intensity and things like that, because you probably, especially for the first few weeks, increase your strength. I know I did. For the start, it did drop off eventually, but for the first few weeks, like you're still fine, you're still okay, you can still increase strength. So I wouldn't necessarily change anything until you feel that you actually need to.
Yeah, definitely agreed with that. I think mindset is massively overlooked. One of my comp prep clients at the start of the year is like a week into a deficit. He was like, he messaged me saying I can feel the strength going away already, and I was like, and I had to call him, and I just said, right, you need to change your mindset. You need to think, what can I do to even potentially increase strength or maintain it? Because he hadn't even followed like anything structured in his previous training experience, and the fact that he was now following something structured with a bit of daily undulating periodization, which not that it's magic, but he was following some of that, and eventually like up till about 3 weeks out from his show, he was just gaining strength consistently, and that's because he just had a changed mindset, structured training, and went into it thinking that no, I'm not going to lose strength. I'm going to try everything that I can to sort of maintain it. I think that it does have some, obviously, majority of maintaining or chasing strength that has pros, but I think there are some cons that people can chase it too much and therefore either risk injury or getting themselves on the sidelines for a little bit, and take the focus away from form and then put it into trying to maintain, and people obviously forget that leverages change massively when you do lose body fat, and that your relative strength comparative to your new body weight is also something that's worth taking into consideration. Something that I never did either. I was consistently trying to maintain.
I think it's worth always reminding the client or the person prepping of that as well, that actually, even if you just maintain your strength, if you are a stone lighter, you are stronger.
So much stronger, yeah. Definitely.
So, like, you need to consider that as well. Like, and especially like small drops off of the bar. Like sometimes you might drop half a stone to a stone, but their bench press will drop off by 2.5 kilos, and they'll feel gutted about that. But then it's like, well, actually, that's still really good, even though you've dropped weight on the bar. Look at your strength to weight ratio.
Yeah.
As opposed to just the absolute weight, because anyone could just kind of get fat and lift big weights. I mean,
exactly.
Yeah.
It's definitely possible. Okay, so in terms of my final question on training, I'd like to ask how you've briefly covered it. Actually, no, you haven't. Not really. In terms of how you'd manage fatigue throughout a deficit in terms of training, talk about how you'd structure maybe deloads, or say in the situation where you'd had a client and they were maybe messaged you saying, I just can't do this session, is there any sort of like things you would do in terms of a week off, like a deload, or a week lighter weights deload, or any specific 1 day changes that you'd make, especially when dieting?
I probably wouldn't make like necessarily 1 day changes, only because that's almost like if someone has a spike in weight in the scales, you're not going to drop calories. It's the same sort of thing. It's like it's 1 day out of like a bigger picture kind of thing. So it's something to consider there. But I always program in deloads, like regular deloads. So whether that be kind of 3 on, 1 off, 4 on, 1 off, 5 on, 1 off, or whatever. Sure. And they tend to probably be a little bit more frequent during contest prep.
Okay.
For some people, I've reduced their kind of frequency of training, so I've dropped it from 5 down to 4. And again, that does bring down volume slightly.
Do you equate that over the 3 sessions that have become like the 5
that have become 4?
Yeah.
No, so that it would be like a slight drop in volume.
Okay.
It just allows them a little bit more recovery. But I would also educate that client on rest times as well. I would just say, actually within the session, take the piss, get your sleeping bag out between sets. If it means keeping weight on the bar, then sometimes you just got to do what you got to do. But just appreciate that the fatigue is going to build up a lot quicker.
100%.
So yeah, that's kind of it. So the changes that I would make is that I would try and give ranges as much as I can, even in loads, things like loads as well. Just say, look, I want you to do 5 sets of 4 at anything between this load, or something like that. Or it would be this load for 4 to 6 reps.
Got it.
So if that person's feeling good, they're going to do 6. If they're not feeling great, they're going to do 4. So by allowing that degree of flexibility in their training as well, it means that they're not going to get disheartened. Like I found that one of the downfalls of my programming, even more recently, is that I've had a very specific set pattern for, right, you're going to do 5 sets of 4 at 90 kilos.
Right.
And then the person won't get 90 kilos, and then they'll be like distraught. Whereas if I said, right, do 4 sets of 3 to 5, the average is still 4, but they could swing either way depending on how they're feeling. And you almost need to do more of that during a contest prep, because you are going to have great days and you're going to have really low days. Like the pendulum swings a lot further on a contest prep.
Yeah, I'm really, really in agreement with that. And I think that you need to consider the individual potentially when doing rep range work, because whilst some people will really benefit, like I think 80% of people will benefit from that for sure, but I think there's 20% that would be the people that would always come on the low end and just do the bare minimal work, but if given a weight, they'd go in and smash it. Like if they were told directly what to do, they'd go in and kill it. So I think considering the individual and maybe just trying it out for a week. So if you see as soon as you give someone 3 to 5, they're hitting 3 every single session, then you know that potentially maybe they're not giving it their all. Likewise, you could say do 3 to 5 and then tell me the reps in reserve on the last one. And if it's like, potentially they could lie, but they could say like, oh, I had 2 reps in reserve, and like, well, why are you leaving so many there when you could potentially be having them, especially if you're on a good day. So I think from my perspective on that one, I think that's something that a downfall that I could have corrected last year, is that I still did do a lot of stuff that was just with like 3 sets of 9, that's it, no rep range, 5 sets of 4, that's it, no rep range. And I'd be noticing the strength loss more, because I just see it falling off, and when it was like 5 sets of 4, I had to change it around. So yeah, I think that's definitely a big thing to notice.
It's something that I think everyone's trying to work out a system for, and no one's quite got it yet.
Yeah,
definitely. The RPE system, I think it works well in principle, and it does work well for a lot of people. Obviously, like Mike Tuchscherer, who kind of came up with it, extremely strong. but you need to be very, very honest with yourself. Like it's easy. Like if you gave that to someone who just wants to do the bare minimum, their RPEs or reps in reserve are going to be like ridiculous, and they're not really going to be training that hard. So
yeah, definitely.
It's one of those things. It is difficult. Training is very, very difficult during a contest prep. It's going to get harder, and it's just trying to find a method for that individual that's going to allow them to just keep training hard in the gym.
100% agreed. So my final question would be, in terms of like alterations to the diet itself, what would your main tips be for an individual that's, you know, maybe they hit a stall? How would they go about correcting that? And, you know, when would you make a bigger or more aggressive cut as opposed to a smaller one?
Okay, so I'll start off with that last one. The bigger or more aggressive cut compared to the small one is going to depend on how much time they have. How much time they have, how much more they have to lose, and if they have like a time-based goal. So if they have like a photo shoot or a contest or whatever, and they still have, you can tell they've still got 7, 8, 9, 10 pounds to lose, but then they only have 6 weeks, you're probably going to have to make a more aggressive cut.
Yeah.
In terms of alteration, again, it does come down to the individual, but to give you more kind of practical advice, you've just got to weigh up, you know, are you going to be able to tolerate less food, or would you like to do more cardio? Like, you need to try and tip the balance somewhere. And something that I've also added in recently to my practice as well for people that fat loss is, you know, daily energy expenditure. So what their daily step count is, and it's become very popular recently, but that's a big thing as well. So there's 3 options. You can reduce calorie intake, you can increase energy expenditure through active cardio, so actually doing more cardio.
Sure.
Or you can increase daily energy expenditure by just doing more steps. You know, that's a way of doing it, or a combination of all 3. But then in terms of like the changes, again, like calories, you're probably going to want to drop out, you know, anywhere from 100 to 150 calories. You can do it based on a percentage as well, because obviously like a smaller female is going to need, you know, 150 calorie drops a lot compared to a bigger male. So again, it's all kind of dependent. Like it's very difficult without the context.
Yeah.
That's what I would say. But yeah, and again, when it comes to the nutritional, I will ask that again as well. I'll say, look, we're going to have to cut out some fat or carbs. What do you prefer? What's going to fill you up? What makes you feel better? Like, we can do one or the other, or a little bit of both.
Yeah, definitely preference wise is a good way to go. In terms of like, so say a calorie adjustment didn't work, how long would you give it? Say you made a good drop in terms of calories, how long would you give that change to have an effect?
Again, comes down to how long that person has. I'd like to see like 2 weeks. Very rarely do I like to make any calorie adjustments like every week.
Okay.
I think it's pointless, and I think the people that do that are just like, I don't know, they almost want to seem like they're just doing something to justify their service. Like people doing like drops of like 5 grams of carbs, it's like, it's not going to do anything. Like they just want to do like a 5 gram drop every single week to seem like they're doing something. Whereas I would rather make a more substantial cut, see the effect off of that. But I like to give it at least 2 weeks.
Definitely.
But again, you know, depending on people's kind of life situations, they may be going through a very stressful situation in life at that time, and you won't see any weight loss. And again, from a female perspective, depending on their menstrual cycle and things like that, you could make a calorie drop and they'll be losing fat, but because of the state they are in their cycle, their weight will go up. So again, you really have to look at the bigger picture. And also, if you're just looking at weight, that's one thing, but you also need to be asking that person, saying like, are you feeling leaner? What do your pictures look like? You know, how do you feel? That's a big thing as well. I think a lot of people just look at weight, and you know, that's obviously something you expect to come down over time. But in the short term, especially like within, you know, days and weeks and stuff, if someone says to me, I'm feeling a lot more vascular,
yeah, definitely,
they're going to be losing fat. So
head in the right direction.
Yeah.
Do you think that how frequently, on that topic, how frequently would you get like a client or a potential client to take progress pictures in a fat loss phase? Would it be every week or every couple of weeks?
Yeah, so the way I do it, obviously it's all dependent on what that the coach wants to do. I get pictures weekly, measurements weekly, but weigh-ins will be daily, and obviously macros logged daily as well, so we can kind of get that average. But measurements aren't going to change that often. Your photos, even from a week to week basis, aren't going to change that often. But it's just nice to be able to see the whole journey. I think more for the client than anything, to be able to see how it's kind of changed over time, and you can compare week 2 to week 3. But obviously, like when you're contest prep or getting contest lead, you can start to see changes from week to week.
100%, definitely. I think that is the end to my questions, Harry. I think there's definitely a lot of content that can do a lot of favours for anyone that is looking to prepare for a show next year or just get lean, like we said. So if there's unless there's anything you'd like to add, just give the listener basically a roundup as to where they can find you, maybe where you're most active on social media. Then if anyone's not already following, then they can follow you now.
Cool. Yeah, so I guess to summarize and round up the whole podcast, I would definitely say like the biggest thing is to ask yourself whether you are in the right position to contest prep, and making sure that you're, especially for your listeners, like don't allow a contest prep to affect like your education and things like that. Like it's such a an important part of your life and things like that. So just make sure you're in a position to, and you're doing it for the right reasons. So that being a thing. But other than that, yeah, you can find me I'm most active, I'd say, on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Okay. I did try Snapchat for a bit, got bored of it. Especially now Instagram has Instagram stories, that'll do me. But yeah, I'm on there like Harry Ranson, and I'm putting out content daily. And yeah, just doing vlogs and daily information on all things bodybuilding and fitness and nutrition and stuff like that. So that's where you can find me. I think it's just like /Harry Ranson on basically everything. So.
Okay, cool. Wicked. I'll link like your YouTube and any other bits and bobs below. But yeah, thanks very much for sort of coming on the podcast, giving up your time, Harry. I know you're a busy man. But yeah, that is it. If you are listening on iTunes, then please, if you can, give us a review. That would be great. And on YouTube, if you could like the video, that would be perfect. And if you haven't already, then give the podcast a love if you're listening on SoundCloud. Pretty much that's everything covered. And yeah, I will see you back for episode 17. But yeah, thanks again, Harry, and we'll see you in the next one.
Thank you for having me.
Cool.